You gotta make sure you do the crisp breathe. Out of bullets. Yeah. See right there. If you've ever wanted to call your AK a chopper, but there were too many black people nearby, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, I had the green AK first. How's it going, guys? I'm Chris, and this is Regular Guy Training. So, yeah, I figured I would have a little more fun with this one. Throw in some music I like better. Because I've thoroughly given up making money on YouTube at this point. Like, it's absolutely fucking ridiculous. But whatever. Point is, what up? We're talking about the Draco today. This originally was going to get reviewed around like 3,000 rounds, and for some reason or another it kept getting put off, or oh, I need a little more footage here, I need a little more footage there, oh, by the way, there's work, and that kind of stuff. So the round count kind of climbed quite a bit higher than most of my initial reviews. So let's just go straight through it. Let's just talk about it as quickly as possible so that I don't bore everybody out there. And we'll get right to it. Now, let's talk about the performance of a rifle, and then we'll talk about configuration and that kind of stuff. This video is basically going to supplant the last video I did on configuring a Draco and that kind of thing. So, bottom line, right? I hear a lot of stuff about this particular rifle, and I hear a lot of people talking a whole bunch of shit that they don't really know much about as far as short AKs are concerned. First thing is that, like, generally speaking, on Draco reviews, most of what you're going to find is pretty trash and not informative at all. You know, it's very difficult to find anything of any real use as far as guys that are looking at guns that they could either use as home defense options or whatever. So let's talk about this, right? Front end, we got a 12.2 inch chrome lined cold hammer forged barrel. You know, it's very com block-esque in that, you know, we're looking at a 2.5 minute gun if you do your job. What is kind of neat about it too is that with their particular caliber, this is in 7.62 by 39. You don't get much of a performance loss out of the shorter barrels. And the main reason for that is that it's a lower pressure cartridge in and of itself. So generally speaking, on a full-size rifle, you got something like 2,300 feet per second. Off the 12.2, you're looking at 2,100 and change, depending on what type of load that you're firing through the rifle. As far as target ammo or training ammo, my favorite, generally speaking, is Wolf Military Classic. That's because it's loaded about as hot as a com block load without a lot of the consistency issues that you would find in something like Tula, for instance, even though that works just fine in most cases. But Wolf Military Classic, we're looking at 2,100 feet per second and a little bit of change. Now, that from 2,300 feet per second is not a lot of muzzle velocity loss at all, especially considering that you just lost 4 inches worth of barrel. There are not a whole lot of AR cartridges that are floating about that can boast the same thing, to where your 12.2 inch barrel is performing at almost the same as far as like accuracy, reliability, friggin' muzzle velocity as the full-sized rifle. So that's really nice to have. Now you can see that there are a couple of things that are a little bit different for those of you that are AK aficionados. First things first, and what makes the gun feel way lighter than it actually is, even though it's not very light, honestly, is that the front sight tower is integrated with the gas block. It's also a 90 degree, which is really nice. Now, all of this being together rather than separate, it helps with a balance issue more than anything else. And yeah, the barrel's shorter and that kind of thing, but having both of those together actually makes life significantly easier as far as balance and felt weight and that kind of thing. So that helps out a lot. But here's something that you're going to have to deal with. Romanian guns, and this is a Romanian built gun from the Cougar factory. Those front sight drums are tight as shit. Like as shit. Like I had to use channel locks on a standard U-shaped front sight tool to push this over even a little bit. Right? Now here's the thing. If you have a standard U-shape front sight tool, like for those of you that have Tapco tools floating around or Polytech tools floating around, which I'll just suggest the Chinese one, because the Chinese ones are, I haven't seen handles break all the way off on them, right? So whatever. Point is, I got one of those, and pushing one of those over, as far as windage adjustment, is significantly more difficult than like a Chinese one, which is already kind of tight, or like a Malott built gun, which is already kind of tight. It requires like actual force, like real force, to push the fucker over. But that's really not that much of a concern. It kind of forces you to make tiny adjustments, which I'm cool with, and it's hard to overshoot, really, when adjusting these irons. Also, straight out of box, the irons, which are a standard set of AK type irons, and we'll talk about why those are just the better configuration in a second. These were pretty close to on even after the brace was attached and all that stuff. But these were pretty close to on straight out of the box, which was nice because I didn't have to do a ton of work. Far as stock configuration goes, this generally comes with a hooded front sight post. I'll talk about, or front sight tower. I'll talk about why I cut that off here before too terribly long. As far as adjusting elevation is concerned, that was significantly easier. Probably just because it's a screw versus a drum. But that was significantly easier. Yeah, it required some force, but it wasn't like crazy. Now, we start scooting further back, and this is where we start to get into a little bit of differences between furniture, because this takes mostly AKM stuff as far as furniture is concerned. Like, this is a standard KVAR handguard that was actually on a 74. Got whipped off of that and thrown onto this. Originally, there was a standard wooden handguard that shipped from the factory. I put a red Chinese one on. That red Chinese one was getting ready to get cut in half, so then I threw the polymer one on there. And the reason for the electrical tape is I basically had to beat the wooden handguard on. No big deal. This is just to keep it from talking because it is a little loose, no big deal. But it takes standard AKM furniture as far as a handguard is concerned. The gas tube is a little bit shorter though. Okay, and again, we'll talk about configuration and that kind of stuff here in a bit. Standard, mostly, AK type, or AKM type rear sight. The focus is kind of out of jive here. I'll show you a picture of that here in a second. But as you can see, it only ranges out to 500 versus 1,000 and that kind of stuff. Realistically speaking, I'm not going to sit here and be the person that says that you can't hit stuff far away with 7.62 by 39, but 500 yards is where it starts to get really squirrely, because post 400 it's got the trajectory of a thrown brick. So yeah, you can do stuff further away, but 500 is a little more realistic in that, yeah, post 500 with 7.62 by 39, you can touch stuff farther away, but that's more of a roll of the dice than a confident thing that you would have, unless you have some kind of wacky ammo or something like that. But the cartridge in and of itself with like com block loadings and that kind of thing, 500 is pretty realistic. So there's that. Like I said before, the gas tube's a little bit shorter, and we'll come back to that here in a minute. Charging handle is pretty standard. It's a regular ass hook type, no big deal. Safety levers on these things are tight as shit. I had to do a significant amount of bending just to get it to where I personally want them. Now, me personally, with safety levers on AKs, especially when you guys can obviously see the ALG AKT, it's the ultimate in here. I want slightly stiffer safeties, right? Like it actually needs to require some effort to snick off, and you heard the very affirmative friggin' snick in there, versus a lot of AKs where once people do the work to them, they just kind of slide in whatever direction you want. I want a little more effort required to get my safety off, especially if I'm paddle boating, transitioning over to pistol, any of that stuff. Looking at the magazine release here, this is a very standard AKM type release, very much like the Bulgarian square cut release. You're going to want a glove for that, because except for like the Chinese releases, they'll friggin' cut you. But you guys, a lot of people that are AK people already know it's not like an AR to where it does very good at conforming to what you want. It's com block as shit, and that you have to conform to it quite a bit in order to do things well. So gloves, I'd use it, especially this little cut that's in here. That will absolutely molest uncovered hands, especially when it's cold. Holy shit. But this isn't a Tango Down. This is a US Palm. I had one lying around the house. The standard one that comes with this is like the width of a pen. Okay, and I know I have friggin' baby width digits, but when you have like long individual fingers, like it's just weird. It's too small. I don't like it. You know, and then other than that, like that's standard AKM. You have a standard AKM dust cover on here, and again I'll go over why that's just better here in a second. But before we get into configuration and everything else, we're going to talk about accuracy, and we're going to talk about reliability and wear on the individual parts. Let's talk about accuracy first. That's right around 160 yards. And I'm going to drop an entire magazine into it and see how consistent that I can be. A little bit of a rightward bias on there. Now, you guys saw it was hot as shit outside. I had done a bunch of shooting and I decided I was going to go for consistency without trying to take 4 years to shoot a magazine through the rifle. You saw that it shot pretty consistent. There was a little bit of dope shift, but that's no big deal, really. The rifle's hot, so there's going to be a little dope shift regardless. But you guys could see, even with the accelerated pace, it shot fairly tight on a green target that was way reduced in size. You know, it's excellent in that it'll hold its own even when it's hot. Now, let's talk about this, because what pisses me off all the time is that people regard short AKs as inaccurate as shit, just like the regular AK, the regular AKM in the first place, especially in 7.62x39. You always hear, oh, they're so loud. No, they're not. You'd be hard-pressed with a proper muzzle device to really be able to tell the difference at a distance and blind between a full-size rifle and this one. If it is louder, you're not going to notice. Okay, that's number one. Number two, most of the time you see people come out with like the hugest brakes ever versus like a hybrid muzzle device like this Gen 1 PWS FSC47. Okay, and dude, they're not that flashy at all, especially in the dark, as you'll see now. All right, here it is, full-sized rifle, FSC Gen 2. Alright, here it is, Draco, FSC Gen 1. Gen 1 Draco under rapid fire. And this is what everyone thinks you're going to see.
That was just rude.
That's under a surefire dual port brake off of a full-sized AR. Now, talking about flash and stuff, man, it does flash up more than a full-size rifle. It does, but barely. number one. And two, it's not like you're setting the berm on fire like a lot of people would really like to make you think about shorter AKs in general. No, dude, if you have an actual muzzle device on here, then some gigantic break or a flash can on it, or just going at it with a crown, dude, a regular ass AR is going to sound like a cannon, and it's going to make it look like, and honestly, you're going to have huge fireballs shooting out of the front end of it. Okay, and it's sort of annoying to see people constantly saying, oh, they're so loud, you're going to go deaf forever. First of all rifles are loud as fuck. Okay, like all of them are loud. You fire a rifle in a house, you're deaf. It's going to happen. Second, no. If you put on a proper muzzle device, like again, this is a hybrid muzzle device. It's easily my favorite muzzle device for the AK, period. But, dude, they don't recoil all that much more. They don't flash up a whole lot more. If they are barely louder than a full-sized rifle. So, most of the time I hear people bringing these two things up, you could instantly sort of raise your own little red flags and say, okay, this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. You know, because most of them haven't even tried. Now, when we talk about muzzle devices here, most people will note that there is a standard AKM style pin that's supposed to stick out of the front end of this, right? You'll see that there isn't one sticking out of the front end of this front sight tower, and if you pay a little more attention, you'll notice that there is an AR-10 crush washer here. Now, this doesn't happen to everybody. I've asked other people that own Draco Cs. I guess there was just a lot of cosmoline and stuff inside of that pin area. When we were getting ready to cut the thread protector off of it, it just kind of stayed down, and I said, fuck it, I'm not going to sit here and beat on my front sight tower. But it is something that happened. It was a little more inconvenient, and I had to use a crush washer to keep it on. No real big deal, honestly, but it is something that we had to deal with. Now, let's go ahead and strip the rifle apart, and let's go ahead and talk about reliability and wearing the parts. Alright, I brought in the focus a lot. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Just as a forewarning, I did kind of a shit cleaning on this. This was fresh off a class, so it was shot a lot. Students used it, that kind of stuff. But we got about 7,000 rounds on this particular gun here. Right? You can see we just have polishing. Okay? There's no burrs, there's nothing fucking crazy going on. Little tiny bit of rolling on this bolt lug here. Again, that's very normal, especially with shorter action AKs. Very much like a Romanian gun, or really any AK style action, you'll notice that all of this is very, very normal. There's nothing crazy going on. No digging or anything else. You know, it's almost like it was heat treated properly. You know. So, there's that, no big deal. Going to the piston and op rod, which is also very, very normal. Okay, there's nothing crazy going on here. Friggin' just finish being scraped off mostly. And you'll notice here and there, especially on my receiver, I have a little bit of surface rust and that kind of stuff. Honestly, my thing on that is anyone who has surface rust actually uses their AKs, like they go outside and play, you know. But, you know, a little bit of surface rust here and there is not going to hurt you. Moving into the receiver itself, again, friggin' nothing, absolutely nothing crazy at all. You know, nothing gouged, nothing cracked, nothing stupid. By the way, this is an ALG AKT Ultimate. You'll notice that on the single hook there was a little bit of fitting done to that hook because it was making contact with the carrier. So I cut a little bit of a channel out so that it would not do that, because I don't want to, you know, beat my single hook off of my single hook trigger. But, you know, there's that. So that's where on the parts. Let's talk about reliability here. Alright, now that the rifle's together, we can sit here and talk about overall reliability. Now, like I said before, we got a little over 7,000 rounds on it. I don't really stake a number on it until, you know, where we go like by the 1,000 here. I would say we're pretty close to like 7,500, but whatever, that doesn't matter at all. I don't go by 500. It's irrelevant to me. But we're a touch over 7,000 rounds into the review. Another one's going to come up either around the 20 mark or when I kill a barrel or, whatever. Doesn't matter. Point is that in 7,000 rounds, I have noticed that it hasn't been absolutely flawless. Now, for the most part, it runs absolutely like an AK. What is kind of cool about this too is that the shorter action on this and the barrel that's in here is properly gassed. And you'll notice that it is properly gassed because there are a lot of AK actions out there that are overgassed. And when they eject casings, they eject them to the moon and they fan them quite a bit. This one more or less likes to eject, if you're in the prone for instance, about 7-8 yards to the right in a perfect little arc about every time. Every once in a while you'll have a little bit of variation in where exactly it lands, but if you sat there and if you were to shoot in the prone all day, you'd have a nice neat little pool of brass about 7 or 8 yards to the right hand side of you. It doesn't fling them out of there in wild arcs or anything like that, so it's actually pretty neat. Especially with shorter gas systems, and especially with shorter barrels and that kind of stuff, you do want, well, regardless, you want a properly gassed rifle, but in especially shorter systems, guys that overgas guns find out that they're murdering parts really fast, and this is not the case with this particular rifle, which is awesome. Especially from a manufacturer that a lot of people consider almost shit tier, because they're Romanian and all of that, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. I have noticed something about this particular rifle though. If you're running full metal jacket ammunition or if you're running Hornady, pick a thing, it runs 100% all the time. Now, a lot of guys that run AKs, most of the time when they have goofy problems, it's with like Wolf jacketed hollow points, which are barely jacketed hollow points. The only difference between it and full metal jacketed ammo is that there's a cut in it. That's it. They don't do jacketed hollow point anything, which is kind of nuts. But I have had a couple of issues here and there, and by a couple of issues, I mean literally a few in 7,000 rounds. Like one hand type stuff. But I do have to bring that up. Every once in a while I get a failure to feed where, a bullet will get hung up on a magazine or something like that. And every single time it was with that type of ammunition. Also every single time it was Tula. Again, not saying Tula is a bad ammo, I'm saying Tula jacketed hollow points and AKs tend to have some sort of correlation with guns that have goofy stoppages every once in a while. So, okay, no big deal there, especially if it's a few versus that ammo stops my rifle cold all the time. I'd be reevaluating this as a rifle if I did have issues like that. Now, types of ammo shot through it. I've shot Red Army Standard through it, Wolf Military Classic, Wolf Polyformance, Tula, jacketed hollow point and not. Hornady SST is my defense ammo in the gun all the time because it's ridiculous. Stop shooting pigs with them if you plan on taking meat home. It's pretty nasty stuff. I've shot a little bit of soft point through this too, and yeah, as a note, by the way, like every AK on the planet, it doesn't really like soft point ammo either. Again, a few stoppages, but then again, that wasn't on that many bullets. It was like 200. So, there you go. I think that's all the stoppages that I've had on the rifle. I've also shot a little bit of steel core stuff, some M67 ball. And I'm sure that I didn't get the rest of them, but point is, I shot a variety of ammo through the thing. Just like every other well-built rifle ever. It prints different with different loads and all that other stuff, but no real issues. No keyholing, none of that shit. And there isn't really an ammo that I've seen that it specifically didn't like on the accuracy side of the house too. It seems more or less consistent, and all I'm dealing with is a dope shift from one ammo to the other. I will say though, the worst performer easily is Winchester White Box, because it's just shit tier ammo to start. Don't buy it, and it's expensive, and it's brass cased, and AKs generally don't like brass cased fucking anything anyway. So that is what it is. So now that I've gone through the reliability side of the house, let's go ahead and talk a little bit of configuration and what I had to dance with as far as this rifle is concerned. Now this is going to supplant the old configuration video that I did. I'm going to take that down after I put this one up. But this thing comes with a thread protector up front, and that's tack welded on because that's how they're imported, right? A cutting wheel with a Dremel and some patience, that comes right off. Friggin' thread protector comes off, and now you can put a proper muzzle device on it. It takes standard AKM thread, so that's good because there's a billion of those out there. I chose the PWS FSC47. Anyone that's been watching this channel for a length of time will know, yeah, that's you know, I will get all up on that muzzle device and suck its dick every single time I get the chance on camera because it's a great muzzle device. The felt recoil or the impulse that you feel is straight to the rear. It holds down the gun pretty good. It does really good with flash, especially out of short guns, especially the Gen 1s because it's an open time rather than a closed time. Moving further back, I'm sitting here talking about, we're talking now about, you know, barrels and that kind of thing. I didn't fuck with the barrel, gas porting, or gas block of any kind. There's no reason to. It's gassed properly, straight out the factory. We're good. So, didn't mess with any of that. Especially after the gas tube change, I was a little amazed because a lot of times when guys change out gas tubes and that kind of stuff, you'll notice that there's a little bit of a shift in how your ejection is on the gun. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying a lot of people will notice a little bit of a difference between a factory one and something like an Ultimac. Speaking of Ultimacs, there isn't a Draco Ultimac. There is one for the AMD series, like the 65s, which just happen to be like the rudest guns ever. But those tubes from the factory are a little short. Now, Ultimac lets you know that on the Draco C and the next size down on the Draco, this will go in just fine. But once you start to get to like the tiny Dracos, like the ones that I don't even really know why, like the Y Dracos, that's how short they are. Then you'll have to do fitting, which means cutting shit and look for something else, honestly. But the Ultimac works great for this one in particular. The full-size tube will not fit. It is too long. Okay, I had one around the house, and I just tried to see if I could fit it. No, it's long as shit. So it's not going to work. But on top of that, I decided to go with a couple of different lights have been on here, but what seems to stay there more than anything else is a Streamlight ProTac 1, the shorter one, and I kept it a little bit shorter so that it wouldn't get carboned up too terribly bad. It still does, but it's far back enough to where it takes a little bit of effort to cloud that thing up really good and it's still even with the front sight tower, so I don't have to worry about backlighting issues. The Holosun's 515 latest model number 515 something, their latest and greatest fake point T2, that's riding on top of a Midwest Industries mount. A review on that's coming later because there's a lot to be said about it, and right now there's nothing negative about it at all, so I have to keep evaluating to see if any cracks show in its form. Standard AKM style sights. Now here's why standard AKM style sights are really good on this particular rifle in general. One, if you know how to properly use them, like 6 o'clock hold zeros at 50, cutting a dude off at the throat, hitting them in the A-box on a USPSA cardboard target, and then you use Caveman EOTechs up close and that kind of thing, they're already really, really fast. So making peep sights or dust cover mounted sights, which generally speaking are really shitty, okay, it makes life way harder, and I do not like guns that do that. So having a standard set of AKM sights up here helps you shoot really well, pretty far, and honestly, guys that think different have seen me whip off this optic and just go to work at pretty good distances, regardless of task at hand. So it is what it is. You know, well, we already talked about the KVAR style handguard that's on here. Again, this is being held in place, not in place, but I used electrical tape to silence the handguard because that's still there, but without it, it's loose as shit because the previous wooden handguard, the ones that you guys saw in previous videos, was beginning to get cut in half, and I basically had to beat it on there, and that bent the retainer just a little bit, so, you know, don't do that. The reason why I'm not using like a larger handguard or like a Magpul one and that kind of stuff is this goes in and out with me as far as vehicles and that kind of thing. So as much as I can without losing integrity and that kind of stuff. I try to slick up as much of the rifle as I can. And yeah, there's a rifle hanging off the side here and that kind of stuff, but that also helps out with like shootability and that kind of stuff, to where as the rifle gets hotter, I can space my hand off of it and not get burnt, even with gloves on. And guys that shoot AKs enough will know that really is a thing. So as much as I can, I'm trying to slim and dehorn it as much as possible. Big light mags in here because I like to flex on the pores with a Romanian rifle, whatever. And as we go further down, I personally don't use the Krebs, right? Because I like a little more stiffness on my safeties, and when the safety lever itself is a little more stiff, having to sit there and put the safety lever back on safe is a little stabby, especially in the cold. So I just leave it as is. This is really no big deal to me. You know, flex on, flex off, no big deal. An ALG AKT Ultimate. Now this is one of the few rifles that I've ever picked up where immediately after I started touching off that trigger, I'm sitting there like, oh, I'm replacing this. Because it's very, very, very sloppy. That's the most Romanian part of the rifle stock, is it's very, very, very sloppy. It takes forever to break. There's like 80 stages in it. It feels like somebody whipped a bunch of gravel in there. And yeah, you can do work, and yeah, you can do accurate work with it. And if you try really hard, you can get really good with it. But the AKT Ultimate is like 80 bucks. So why? I put the heavier spring in here also because what amounts to a Geisley Super 3 gun and an AK with very forgiving trigger guards and that kind of stuff just made me go, I want that a little heavier. And then after that, like, I threw that extra spring in there, and now it's just a slightly heavier, slightly longer take up, like Geisley Super 3 gun for an AR. You know, it's awesome. So there's that. The sling that's on here, don't pay attention to this sling. I'm evaluating it and it's trash. Like, I hate it. I really fucking hate it. So a better sling is basically on the way, and you guys will know what that sling is, because I tend to not really like negative reviews personally. And if a company is going to work with me to improve a product versus me just being like, hey, whatever happens, happens, dude. You know, but there are other companies that'll just take it on the chin and be like, fuck it, if it dies, it dies. We get to improve it. Actually, Amend too. They're really good about that. We have a very transparent back and forth talk going on. So more on that later, though. Now, this part right here, this is where you might want to start debating a little bit, because there's an SBA3 brace on here. That is an adapter for a buffer tube, right? Now, I don't have an issue with the fact that it hooks up a buffer tube or anything like that. What I do have an issue with is that the adapter itself is affixed to the fork that goes up underneath your pistol grip via a singular roll pin punched into the center. Roll pins and AKs generally don't go well together because the action on it tends to wallow that spring pin all the way out. And indeed, something like that started to happen after a while. So what we ended up having to do was we basically drilled through the fork, which is dovetailed into the adapter, right? We drilled all the way through that hole, got that pin out, drilled all the way through to the buffer tube, right? And then we just glued the two halves together rather than trying to tension fit them together, because we threaded it, you know, dyed it, and put a big ass screw in the center and then supported it with a second screw, right? Just to make sure that it's in there. Now this is in here far more sturdy than from the factory, right? And a lot of you are going to say, oh, well, fuck that, I'll go to Rifle Dynamics. But with Rifle Dynamics, you're drilling into the receiver now, right? There's no receiver work on this rifle at all. So, well, rifle, it's fucking extreme air quotes pistol, but it is what it is, right? Like, so you're drilling into the receiver now, okay? Some people are going to be like, I don't care, it's a receiver thing, I can do a receiver, I don't care about that. Some guys just want to be able to have the option to not have to go into their receiver and drill stuff. Either way, you're going to be drilling things. Either way, you're going to want to make sure this is as secure as possible. So if you know your way around tools a little bit, this is really not that big of an issue. It'll just be a little frustrating because the fork that's dovetailed into the adapter, these are two different types of metal. I think this is aluminum and then the adapter is steel. And you'll know when you get there, when you start drilling. But other than that, this is more sturdy than it's ever been from the factory. So that is what it is. And the third option, of course, is instead of using a buffer tube adapter, you could just go with, you know, the SB Tactical, like standard, like fixed braces that don't go on buffer tubes and that kind of thing. So the options are out there. Just understand that if pretty much anything's being held together by a roll pin, stock with an AK, if you use it hard enough, it's wallowing out. Like it's just going to lose its tension and come out of there. So understand that before you get into all of that stuff. But that's the configuration on a rifle. Okay. And realistically speaking, it's been a solid performer. It is much more balanced. It feels lighter than a full-sized rifle, even though it really isn't. I mean, if you hold one up next to the other, if this is lighter, again, it's not much lighter at all. But it balances much better. It's far easier to do one-handed stuff with it and that kind of thing. And because it's better balanced, it's far more maneuverable. It fits in cars and that kind of thing. So altogether, there's a reason why like Russian special operations teams, or for the Romanians, they used a Draco C with their paratroops and commandos as well. The difference between that, or this and a military Draco C for the Romanian army, is theirs has a wire folding stock on it. That's it. It's literally it. You know, so, you know, they use it for their paratroops and commandos as well. And I know this isn't like a big deal because Romanian commandos, who cares, right? But we start talking about Russians and Bulgarians and Chinese dudes and that kind of stuff, and they've been using 12-inch barreled lengths for a long time. There might be a reason for it. Just understand that because it's a little bit shorter, it gets hot a little bit faster. Okay? So just pay attention and that kind of stuff, and you'll be okay. Other than that, it's very much like an AK, especially a con block AK. It's a little rough around the edges. You will probably get cut by this rifle at one point or another. It's unavoidable, similar to a Wasser 10. It's con block accurate, which is plenty. It's plenty accurate, and generally speaking, people that talk shit about AK accuracy don't shoot as well as the AK anyway. Plenty fast, and I have nothing else to say. It's been a very good rifle. Just understand this: if you are going to configure this very similar to what I have on the table, you're going to spend some money because you can't cheap out on AK components if you intend to use them seriously. With this on board and everything as you see it, it's very close to $2,000. With like an Aimpoint T2, we're a tick over. You see what I'm saying? Like this was almost a $400 optic, I think. I think it is right at 400 with a mount and that kind of stuff. And then you have a mount for that light, which the mount for that light's a Daniel Defense offset 1913 section. You know, PWS, the Gen 2's like $100. You can keep the standard handguard or go over to KVAR1. KVAR stuff ain't that expensive as far as furniture goes. Ultimax, $100. Freaking, that's going to be around $40, $45, that kind of thing. The brace in the tube, if you configure it like this, is going to be like $100, like $135. And the adapter here is like 50 and change, close to $60 probably after shipping and all that shit, right? And the base Draco C is 600 and change, like right off the rack, you know. But so if you're following along, and I probably missed something here or there, this isn't including magazines. We're getting close to $2,000. But then again, a lot of ARs, when you're done configuring stuff all the way with fucking quality parts, you're hovering around that after an optic and mount and all that shit too. So, you know, it depends on what type of reliable rifle configured the way you want are we looking at here. You know, what kind of money are you willing to spend? So that's all I have on this, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. It took far too long to make. I have to apologize for not putting out a lot of stuff recently, between military orders, and honestly, for some reason, there's been a little bit of family trouble. Not like trauma, but people have died, right? I'm getting ready to go to my second funeral here inside a month. So I've been busy with a lot, as well as running the company and everything else. So I know you guys are understanding about this kind of shit anyway. So I'm glad that you're hanging in there with me. We have a lot of classes on the schedule now. Like, there's been a lot of stuff that's been added through the winter season. We're not done, but there are a lot of classes that are planned out to like March. Like, my shotgun class is on the website, for instance. Another dedicated AK class is getting ready to happen in Tulsa when it's as cold as possible in Tulsa. Okay, I got AK class going down in Mississippi fairly soon. There are classes going down in October. There's a ton of pistol stuff going on now because I pay attention to current events too, and I believe that we should do a little more pistol stuff. But there is a bunch of carbine stuff going on here fairly soon. The marathon series is getting ready to get put down. The vehicle class has been sold out. Like, after I announced it, that's sold out in hours. You know, and there's more stuff getting added pretty much by the day. Like, for instance, I'm working out possibly going to Michigan here around about spring break time for a lot of your kids. So pay attention to the schedule. If you want to come out and train with us, you absolutely can. For those of you that don't want to pay full price for a class, you can sign up for $35 a month and come and get that ass whooped as often as you want to. There's a lot of guys out here with over 18, 19, 20 classes now. Okay, and they come from all walks of life, okay? So it's not just like military and law enforcement douchebaggery and alphabet letter types. Matter of fact, we generally just don't get those people because they know what's what. They don't want to have to do the ATF meme 8,000 times. And now that I've said that, I'm getting a visit just like DHS. Now, and that has a story in and of itself. Fucking gay communists being mad at me and sending DHS at my house. But point is, though, is that there's classes all over. We sell hats and that kind of thing too. There's still the Facebook group that's going strong. There's still a lot of people on there reminding us about political things that we need to get into. Yes, I will be doing a political video fairly soon because I'm getting back into the swing of things. So all the links for all of this are in the description below. And as a note, by the way, if you're a school resource officer or a teacher permitted to carry in the classroom, we will do a verification process, but I will train you without a tuition fee forever. So take advantage of that. A few people already have. Okay? Because the way I view it, we might as well protect our children like we protect everything else valuable on the planet, and that's with armed dudes. So, I'm done here. Remember, guys, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.